Good morning, my name is Fernando. I'm a Brazilian developer living in UK with my family. I've worked in many different companies back in Brazil, and currently I'm working for PayProp in Seven Oaks. I've been writing Perl for a long time, and I've been playing with Raku since before Christmas. I have several projects in Raku, including Red, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. Red is a ORM that tries to be the more rakuish possible. ORMs are a way of representing tables and rows using classes and objects. For queries, ORMs do that representation use some kind of API that generates the SQL query. Most of them map queries into methods or chained methods. So you should pass the different parts of SQL query, like where or order by, to an API. Most of the ORMs I could learn about do queries focused on the SQL it will generate. They usually have a method like search or select to preparing the query and receives parameters, or uses chained methods to set each part of it, like where filters or group bys or joins, like these examples over here. So red is written in Raku and for Raku, and it tries to avoid creating new APIs. Instead, it tries to use Raku APIs themselves. No new APIs for the users to learn when possible. More than that, it does not map SQL into Raku, but the opposite. It maps Raku to SQL. Red queries work as if tables were arrays of objects. It uses lazy lists and sacks for create the query. So it uses map, grep, first, etc. The same methods used to manipulate lists in Raku, instead of having new APIs for doing that. So for example, if there is a post class like this one that has some attributes like ID, title, body, and published, you can create this array at post with some objects like here. If you need to get the title of every published post, you could just do something like this. It using only grep and map, two very used and well-known Raku methods. So, for example, to print the title, you would just need to iterate of that, like this. So, and just for comparing, let's see how you would do that using red, getting the data from the database. Yeah, almost exactly the same. But let's analyze the first one. All starts with the array at posts that contains the list of posts. Then we grab the published posts from at posts and use map to get the titles. Grep on at posts returns a sack. This sack is kind of a representation of all the published posts. It does not contain the posts, but it knows how to get it. It will only get the items once it gets iterated over, but that's not the case here. Map is called on the sack returned by grep. It does not return the titles, but a sack representing the list of title, as grep does. Then 4 iterates over the sack. Only now the items are computed when the sack gets iterated over. And that's almost exactly the same with red. Post.all is a positional representing all posts, just like the array at posts. Different from array at posts, it is a lazy list. Like the sacks, it does not have the items, but it knows how to get them. Grep will return a result sack representing all the published posts, all rows where the column published is true. A result sack is just like a sack, but it represents the results of a database query. But the database query is not performed yet. It's only performed when you iterate over a result sack. Map also returns a result sack, but a new one that combines everything from grep and now with map. And then 4 iterates over the result sack, returned by map, running the SQL query. Now we do access the database and runs the query. So just to let it clear, post all is a positional. If someone binds the array at posts to posts all, the code becomes exactly the same as the array version. Post all is just a result sack, and result sacks do positional. But what happens when 4 iterates over the result sack returned by map? It uses the conditions set by grep as a where filter and the one set by map as selected values to generate the SQL query. When we've been using the post class as the definition of a post, we've been using the post class as the definition of a post. To use that with red, we would need some small changes. First, we would need to say that's not a class, but a model. Using model instead of a class will change its meta class that includes many meta methods to interact with the database. Another thing we need to do is to specify what attributes are columns. To do that, we use the trait isColumn or one of its cousins. For example, isId that defines a column as primary key, isSerial that says that the column is primary key and auto increments, isUnique that adds unique constraint to the column. There are other traits to set attributes as columns and also other kind of traits like relationships that creates relationships between models. For inserting, deleting, and updating rows, meta methods should be used. Red do not add any method on your models, but it changes its meta class. So every method for interacting with the database from models are meta methods. You have some ways of creating new rows. One of them is to use new to create a new post object as you would do on any class, and then use the save meta method to send it to the database. Other way is using the meta method create. That's a shortcut for new and create. Create meta method also has many other shortcuts for creating many related rows at once using relationships and other kind of stuff. For deleting an object, it's just the case of calling the delete meta method. It will run that SQL delete query. For updating it, just change the value of what you want and just save it. But if you want to delete a bunch of rows without needing to iterate over it or getting it from the DB, you could just use a result-seq method. So to delete all the non-published posts, for example, you just get a result set representing all posts with the columns published being false. Just use a grep for that and call delete on that. This delete is not a meta method because it's a result-seq method. It's not added on your model. And for updating a bunch of rows, instead of getting each one of those, changing it and saving it, you can just use the result-seq method as shown here. You just use map on the result-seq, change the values you want, and call save on the returned result-seq. There is some things that we could change to make our models methods more useful. If you have those two methods, title starts with and has big body, for example, if you can call them on your object, and it would work as you would expect. But you could also use them on while grabbing or mapping a result-seq, as on this snippet. For example, here we are grabbing over all posts that has big body and where title starts with blah. So this would generate this SQL query. But the thing is, it just only works because we are using methods here and not attributes. Read to try to understand what the grep and map blocks are doing. It calls the methods and everything. It uses type objects for type model objects. So if you try to use a method inside of a grep and that method uses an attribute, it would throw an exception. And what about we are thinking on filters of red? So it's very hard to read to understand what's going inside grep map blocks to convert that to SQL. With Raku AST, that tends to become much easier. I'm looking forward to implement the usage of Raku AST on Red. We had a list of issues required to be closed until we release our first stable version, the 1.0.0, and there is only one more issue still open, so we are going to release our first stable version in the near future. And that's it. Thank you very much, and I hope you like red. And I'm on red channel on IRC, and that's the red links. Okay, thank you very much.